For a roommate, so like many people, he posted an ad on the website Craigslist to find someone willing to share the rent on his one-bedroom Manhattan apartment. He thought he'd found a match when a guy named Don, who seemed to get along with his cats, pay the rent on time, began sharing his apartment. But something wasn't right. Don would leave for long periods of time without letting Brian know. And then after 4 months, Brian came home to find Don's room, and just Don's room, ransacked. And Don was nowhere to be found. Shortly after that, Brian learned Don had been stealing and recording Brian's personal information, and eventually that Don had actually been profiled on America's Most Wanted. Joining us now is Brian Boucher, who recounts this bizarre roommate experience in this week's New York Magazine. Brian, thanks a lot for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's take it from the beginning. So you interview this guy, and you think what?
He seemed like a regular guy. The conversation was relaxed, nobody jumping in when there was a silence for a couple of minutes.
Better than other people you'd interviewed, right? I mean, he was the best match of the people you met?
You know, he was the first person to come and look at the apartment. Other people weren't able to come, or they found another place before we met, and so he was actually the only person I interviewed, and I thought we hit it off well.
All right, at what point do you start thinking that maybe something's at least off?
The long absences, unannounced, I wasn't so crazy about, but I thought, well, he doesn't report to me, it's his business. After the break-in, when I got home to find his room ransacked and even, you know, a few dollars in my top drawer untouched and my stereo and my computer there, I really thought, this is not normal.
So you're thinking he's like a spy or a terrorist or something at this point?
Exactly. My fantasies went straight to Al-Qaeda. I thought, you know, somebody came to get the microfilm or something. I was terrified, and I thought, this guy is definitely a spy or something similarly dramatic.
Did you call the police at that time?
I did, and I called 911, and 2 police came, and they said, where's your roommate? And at that point, I hadn't seen him in a while. It was during one of his absences. And so they said, for all we know, it might have been your roommate. There's no crime here. Talk to him about it when you see him.
All right, and then what happens next? I mean, then some time passes, right?
A little time passed, and then he resurfaced, ironically enough, on Christmas Eve 2003. Saying he was back from the West Coast where he had been visiting a relative. And when I heard his voice on the phone, I thought, okay, I must be crazy. He's the regular one. He's back in the city. So I met up with him the next day and let him back into the apartment. I had changed the locks, of course.
And what did he say about the break-in?
He had a few theories. He thought it was, well, he had one theory, sorry. He thought it was our next-door neighbor who was uncommonly interested in my lodger. The two of them got acquainted, and my neighbor had a key because he would feed my cats when I went away. So he hoodwinked me into thinking that it was the neighbor.
So how did you then realize that he was taking down all of your personal information, taking notes about the names of your friends, etc.?
That happened a few months later when he disappeared again in June, and it was only after rent day had come and gone, 2 more weeks passed, and I thought, okay, this guy's not coming back. And I went into the room and packed up his things, and hidden in the bed, found a manila file folder and looked in and immediately saw the files that he had been keeping on me.
And what was in those files?
It started with pre-approved credit card offers that I had gotten in the mail that I had torn up and thrown in the trash, which he had fished out of the trash and kept on file. And then on a loose leaf sheet of paper, there was all my current credit card information. He had my social security number, the name and address of my employer, copied from a pay stub, my mother's maiden name, the date that my parents had been married, which I couldn't have told you off the top of my head.
Wow. And at that point, you're scared, right?
Very scared indeed. Yes, it was terrifying.
But
and I felt like an idiot. I felt like I brought this guy in to help me save a few dollars, and who knows what I might have lost in the process.
But then you had to do your own sleuthing for a while, right, to figure out who he was?
That's right. I also found correspondence from JetBlue addressed to somebody by a different name, which was another victim of his identity theft. I also found photocopied social security cards and driver's licenses from other people who were not the name that he gave me. I found nothing under the name that he gave me, which was John Williams, which seems very funny in retrospect. And finally, it was only when I got into his computer through the help of a friend and found the sign-in name, which was Dino Smith. And Smith, of course, seemed like such a generic name. I thought, this can't possibly be his actual name. And just sort of on a whim, I Googled Dino Smith, and that was when I found out who I really had been living with.
So you put in Dino Smith into Google, and what pops up?
The first link was America's Most Wanted's website.
And he was wanted for a huge jewel heist.
That's right. Lang Antique and Estate Jewelry in the Union Square neighborhood of San Francisco. They had made off with, I think, estimates that I read varied from $6 to $10 million of antique and estate jewelry.
Wow. And he had also had a long criminal record before that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you obviously, the authorities from San Francisco were receptive to hearing from you at that
They
point.
were very interested to hear about this, and they came and took a very close look at the apartment.
And then you ended up having to testify against him.
Correct. I went and testified that the evidence that I had found was turned over to the police exactly as I had found it. The defense wanted to argue that I was an agent of the San Francisco police and that I had created the evidence on the computer.
Yeah, we deal with that stuff every day on this program, all sorts of arguments like that in terms of the defense. All right, so now did you find a new roommate?
I did. In fact, I found some terrific new roommates.
Did you do a background check?
I did not do a background check or a credit check. I trusted my instincts again. I know, call me crazy.
You went back to the same place, to Craigslist?
I went back to Craigslist. Craigslist is not the problem.
Brian Boucher, it's a fascinating article. Well done. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you.